Okay, this is 7th grade activity 6.2. Our objective today, students will be introduced to some vocabulary of common solids and asked to sketch several solids. They'll be practicing in this activity actually finding surface area of those solids. The page number or the standards covered are 7G4 and 6. The page numbers out of the hardcover book are 256 through 257, and out of the practice journal, page 141 through 143. Okay, today we're going to be working with surface area. So understanding that a prism is a three-dimensional figure. So the surface area of a prism is the sum of the area of each of its sides put together. A two-dimensional representation of a solid is called its net. So for example, this is a rectangular prism because the base is made up of a rectangle. So we actually have two bases that are rectangles there. And they are interconnected by what they call a lateral face. So the lateral face is just that middle section that is separating those two bases. So this blue, the blue that's making up that middle section is what they call the lateral face or the lateral portion of this figure. A net is going to be like if I were to take and cut that apart and be able to unfold what it would look like, you would see that that figure, that three-dimensional figure actually consists of two bases and then four rectangles that are making up that lateral face. And so today what we're going to work with is breaking our figures down into their nets and understanding how to find the surface area. Okay, so practice page or your journal out of your pages out of your journal are pages 141 and 142. So we'll be working through some of these together and then I'll have you kind of work on one on your own. So here it says, use the net for the rectangular prism to find the surface area. So some of you are going to be comfortable with maybe not needing this net, but we're going to practice drawing them just so that you're comfortable with if you were to ever come across a net, how you break down what a net. Because sometimes I know that I have seen some of these on like standardized tests or on your STAR testing where they give you the net and then they ask you which solid it would create. Well, if you've never been introduced to a net, you don't understand how to kind of piece them back together. So the key thing is that you're identifying that you've got a lateral surface area, which usually makes up the middle part of your net. Okay, so when you're looking at that, that's kind of the middle section of your figure. And then your two pieces that go off to either side are your bases. So I always, whenever I look at these, if I am looking at a question, I always look at these two shapes right here on the side to kind of help me decide, so you know, what figure it's actually representing. Okay, so now if I go through and I find the surface area, you're going to notice that each of these is split into, whoops, that's a terrible line, but we actually have four rectangles that are making up that middle part. Okay, now I'm one that tends to like to use the three-dimensional figure, but that's because I'm comfortable with it. So I will go ahead and kind of mark off also on my net what I'm seeing. So here, if I look on my net, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 by 1, 2, 3 blocks. So the area of that piece would be 18 units. Okay, so then when I look at my next piece of my lateral face, I'm still 6 high here, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 wide. So 6 times 5 would give me 30 for that area. Now, the thing that hopefully you will understand is when you work with prisms, you have sides on the opposite that are exactly the same. So you'll notice here I'm 6 by 3, so this is also 18. And this is 6 by 5, so this is also 30. Okay. Then I also have my bases, which are my top and my bottom of that figure that's on the left. So my base here is 3 by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, so 15 and 15. Now, if I want the whole surface area, I'm going to add all 6 of those numbers together. Or what I tend to do is I tend to chunk numbers. Why? Because my top and my bottom, we found out were, the top was 15, the bottom was 15, right down here. Those were the same, so I get 30 when I add them together. Okay, my front was 18. I have a back here that's exactly the same of 18. 18 plus 18 gives me 36. And then I also have a side, which is right here, which was 5 by 6. That was this part right here. Okay, and that was 30. Well, and I've got another one over here that's also 30 that we can't see. So 30 plus 30 gives me 60. So now if I go through and I add all 6 of those together, or my chunked numbers that I have written on the bottom there, I would have 66 plus 60 would give me 126. And then whatever the units are. Here they didn't give me units, so I'm just going to say units squared. Okay, remember area, this is surface area. Area always has squared on it, okay? All right, let's go ahead and look at another one. So sometimes they give you the grids, but not very often will they give you the grids. You're gonna have to understand how to break your shape apart into its different pieces. So let's kind of look at letter C, and then we'll go back to letter B in just a little bit. So if we look at letter C, it's giving us all of the dimensions. They didn't even give us the 3-dimensional figure. It says work with a partner, find the surface area of the solid shown in the net, then copy the net, cut it out, and fold it. If you don't want to do the process of cutting it out and folding it, that's okay. It just gives you a good idea of physically what that would look like as a 3-dimensional shape. So when I go through to do this, I've got what? This is 3 by 3, and that would be a square. So 3 times 3 would give me 9. Okay, here, this is 5 by, what was this height here? 3. So for my middle section there, it's 15 for my surface area. I'm going to circle these. And this is still 3 by 4. And that gives me 12. Okay, the nice thing about having the net is you physically get to see all of those lateral surface areas that normally you don't necessarily see when you're seeing it as a 3-dimensional figure drawn on a 2-dimensional piece of paper. Okay, so then I've also got my bases. Remember, my bases are the ones that stick out on the edges. And we have to remember our formula for finding the area of a triangle. Okay, the area of a triangle is base times height divided by 2. So the tricky thing is on this one, you have to know which is your base and your height. So anytime they give you a right angle, those are the 2 sides that you're going to use for your base and your height. So I will not be using 5 here, because if I was going to use that, I would need to know the distance up to this. Okay, so we're not going to be using 5. We are actually going to be using my 3 and my 4. So remember, the area of a triangle is base times height divided by 2, or half of my base times my height. So if I do 3 times 4, gives me 12 divided by 2. I just found out that this is 6. I also have 6 on this one because they are exact copies of each other. Okay, final step to do my surface area is to add everything together. I tend to chunk numbers. So 6 plus 6 would give me 12. Okay, those give me 24. And you could use your calculator to chunk them all together. These 2 together also give me 24. Okay, so 24 plus 24 gives me a total of 48. There were no units listed, so I'm just going to say units squared. Okay, now if you want to use a calculator to add all of those together, of course you may do that. I just tend to chunk numbers when I don't have my calculator handy so that I don't have to do as many digits. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at letter B. Letter B says, copy the net for this rectangular prism, label each side H, W, or L, then use your drawing to write a formula for the surface area of a rectangular prism. So in other words, what they want us to do is they want us to label each of these pieces. So when I'm looking at this, it's all in the way that I look at it. Remember, these 2 are my bases that are sticking out. Okay, so those are my bases. So that is this piece right here. Okay, so that's this sitting back here, wherever it's at. So it looks like my longer side is my L and my shorter side is my W. So this is W and this is L. And if you want to just use a regular L, that's okay too. Okay, so now if I look, it looks like on my lateral surfaces, I've got a skinny one that's got my height and then my width. So my skinny blocks here, this would be my W and this would be my L. or not my L, sorry, my H. Okay, so that means all of these going up and down are my height. So I could label each of these individually if I need to. Okay, so my skinnier one was what, my width. So then that leaves my wider lateral surface area to be my length. So this is my length. And you can see if I would just label this one on all four sides, it ends up labeling this middle lateral surface area right here for me too. Okay, so then that means that this is also my L here. Okay, so that's just working with being able to identify. Now, if I were to go through and actually give numbers, I could then substitute in the numbers and find those. So to find my surface area, okay, they want us to write a formula for finding surface area. So the one thing that we notice that when we're doing rectangular prisms, you have everything, each side you have, of the sides that you see, that you can physically see, like on your two-dimensional figure here, you actually have two of those. So if I were to draw over this, I have two that are H times W. So I have two that are height times width. Okay, and then when I'm done, I'm actually adding all of these together. So I could add all 6 of them together, or I could go 2 times my front and my back. 2 times the front, which would give me the back. So I'm just going to take 2 times each of these. I also have, for this side right here, my length and my height, and I've got 2 of those. So my L times my height. And then I've also got 2 of these, which were my W and my L, which is right here, my L. And I've got 2 of every single one of those. So that would be the formula that you could use, that you could then go through and plug in. I will tell you, I'm one that tends to go through and find each side and then take each of them times 2, instead of adding them all together and then taking them times 2. But that's pretty much it. So out of this activity, the main thing is understanding that your 3-dimensional figures can be broken down into nets. A net is a 2-dimensional representation of that 3D figure. When you set up your nets, the middle section that we have here is called our lateral surface area. And our 2 edges that stick out, or our 2 pieces that stick out on the edges, are our base shapes. Okay, so good luck with this.